I'm very happy to welcome you to the UC Student and Policy Center. Raise your hand, a little bit of audience participation. There's just a small amount. Raise your hand if this is your first time coming to our California Leaders Speaker Series. Are you freshmen to the Speaker Series? Okay, fantastic. You are in for a treat today. This Speaker Series is very much a part of the mission of this building and the University of California, and that is to gather together in what I think is a relatively intimate space and learn from California's leaders from both sides of the aisle, whether they're running for governor or not, and get to find out what their leadership journey has been, what is their style, what are their priorities for California, to learn, innovate, debate a little bit, explore, and then go out into our world, our capital community and beyond in California, knowing one another better and knowing California better. So we're delighted that you are here to be part of that conversation. And we've got a couple other conversations coming up as well for you to mark your calendar. This is today's, of course. But please also, if I can't, there we go. We also have a debate on October 14th. Less a debate, more of a constructive conversation, so the anti-presidential style debate on Prop 50. This week, if you haven't already received your ballot on this measure will be arriving, and this will be an opportunity for you to hear a little bit about the history of redistricting, hear with plenty of time the yes side, hear the no side, and have some moderated questions, and then ask your own, and then go away better informed and ready to cast your vote. So please join us on October 14th. That's going to be during the noon hour, with lunch included, of course. And then we do continue our California Leaders Speaker Series. There we go. Our next Speaker Series will be former Congresswoman Katie Porter, and then we'll be announcing our Speaker Series in the coming year. You're going to see members from both sides of the aisle from all across California that you get to visit with, and we'll be delighted to welcome you here. But with that, I'm going to turn this over to our terrific moderator, whom I met, I think, right in my very first race at a Republican convention back in 2013, and that's Scott Shafer from Political Breakdown at KQED. Scott has been with KQED and reporting since 1998. Just a child.
I started when I was 15.
Oh, that's pretty good. And has been really reporting on California's leadership and politics at the state and federal level, and has great shows to do that and great programs. And we're very honored to have him today. And he's going to introduce our special guest. So, Scott, take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, Catherine. We miss your wisdom in the legislature, but glad that you're here. Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. Well, Xavier Becerra is very familiar with Sacramento. He was born here 67 years ago, served briefly in the state assembly, and then got elected to Congress in 1992, served 12 terms representing Los Angeles in Congress. He was chosen to be our Attorney General by then Governor Jerry Brown when Kamala Harris went to be U.S. Senator. Yeah, exactly. I lose track of the revolving door sometimes. But and as AG, during the Trump term, the first term, he filed more than 100 lawsuits on everything from DACA to the border wall to abortion and women's health and LGBT rights. In 2021, Joe Biden chose him to be the Health and Human Services Secretary, and he served all 4 years of that administration, which brought him, of course, right into the teeth of the COVID pandemic. And now he's returned to California, and I think he's running for governor. So please welcome Xavier Becerra. All right. Well, I want to, of course, talk to you about being governor and all that, but I want to first ask you about some things that are very in the news and also intersect with your resume very much. And I'll just start with what happened yesterday. Up in Oregon, President Trump tried to deploy 300 California National Guard troops up to Portland, which he claimed was burning and was a war zone. The judge was not impressed. It was a Trump judge, by the way. And I'm just wondering, what do you think? We've seen this in Los Angeles, where he federalized the troops, the National Guard here, sent them to LA. What's going on? What do you see happening? What is the end game here?
Scott, first let me thank the UC Center for letting me come by. Thanks to everyone who's here. Please eat away and enjoy your lunch. And Scott, good to see you again. What's going on here is a president who, in his first term, overreached, exceeded the law, and we were able to check him quite a bit. By the way, I ended up suing him over 120 times. And he's learned. this is Trump 2.0. And so he is going beyond the parameters that the Constitution set out for our executive, and he's pushing the limits. And he's got more judges that he's appointed. Fortunately, some seem to be following the law. And he's now taking on, as you probably saw, the military and firing the judge advocate general. The JAGs are the folks that make sure internally that the laws are obeyed by our military officers, from basic soldier all the way to general. He is dismantling so much of our institutions of governance. It would be impossible to do what I achieved as a secretary of HHS, where we got some 700 million COVID shots into your arms in those 4 years that we were there. And that's why we can socialize today without wearing masks. But now that's nearly impossible with what they're doing. And I think you see that this is a president who's going to use every lever he sees in front of him, even if that lever has a stop on it. He's going to exceed it, and it's up to us to make sure we put a stop to that.
There's a lot of people who feel that he wants a confrontation. That didn't happen in L.A., but he wants that to basically justify what he's doing, and then some see it as the beginning, sort of the tip of the spear. And I'm wondering, as you think down the road, where do you see this going? I mean, do you see troops guarding polling places and intimidating voters? I mean, what's the worst case scenario, and what would you hope not to see happen?
I don't know if this guy has any restraints, if he has any limits. If he does, he's certainly blown past the ones that I saw when I was Attorney General. I don't know how you justify firing employees who have essentially contracts to work. I don't know how you stop funding for cancer research with institutions that have grants. If anyone here is a lawyer, contract law, parties can't just unilaterally decide to break a contract. I don't see how you have federal troops come into domestic areas of the country when we have posse comitatus and other laws, and the Constitution itself, which say you never use our U.S. military against your own citizens in your own domestic territory. All of these he has gone beyond. Our institutions are bending, in some cases breaking, and I don't think he has a filter to say stop.
Well, of course, the other thing, and you sort of alluded to it a minute ago, the government is shut down, and there is a threat to fire, not just furlough, but fire a lot of federal employees. And of course, the Democrats say this is about health care, something you know a little bit about as former secretary, and also having helped pass DACA, Obamacare, ACA. Is this the right fight for Democrats right now? And how do they win? What does winning look like?
It is the fight. It isn't the fight that they made. It's the fight that Donald Trump put before them. It is disingenuous for President Trump or anyone in Congress, but mostly the Republicans, to say that Democrats are not willing to keep the government funded because they want to defend health care. They are defending health care, but that's not the reason for the government shutdown. The government shutdown is because for the last year, President Trump and Republicans never offered Democrats a chance to negotiate. You don't just give up. I say this as a former member in the House of Representatives for 24 years. You don't just give up your vote. Someone writes a bill. If you don't like it, you say, well, okay, let's discuss it if you want my vote. There was never once a discussion about what it would take to get Democratic votes. Is anyone surprised then when the Republicans put a my way or the highway bill on the floor? Democrats said, well, that's your bill. You run the place. You go ahead and pass it. They couldn't pass it. Now they need Democratic votes. And Democrats have said, look, one of the things we want in this discussion about our budgets is you just cut $1 trillion out of Medicaid. That's going to hit all of us extremely hard. You are now making it so that people cannot afford the Affordable Care Act because you're not willing to extend the subsidies that make that health insurance affordable. You want to pass a budget? Then let's take care of the fiscal side of health care before Americans start to really suffer. That's all they've said.
But obviously, this president has tried before to get rid, and Republicans in Congress tried to get rid of the ACA. They failed. This is one way to basically starve it by reducing the subsidies. But that and the Medicaid cuts were a fundamental part of this so-called big, beautiful bill. So what makes you or any of the Democrats, Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, think that he's going to back down?
No idea, and that's the problem but they want Democratic votes so that the government doesn't stay shut down. Donald Trump is unwilling to negotiate to try to get Democratic votes. And so Democrats have no choice but to say, we're not interested in voting for a bill we never had a chance to negotiate or even look at. You don't just get our votes for free. We want to negotiate. And what they've said is they're limiting right now what they'd like to see. I guarantee you there are a whole lot of things in that reconciliation bill that cut $1 trillion out of Medicaid that they'd like to see changed as well. But they've said at least now let's focus on not having Americans suffer the consequences of these hits to their health care simply because Republicans were not willing to negotiate for the last year, and now it's upon us.
All right, well, let's pivot a little bit here. You jumped into the governor's race in April, and you said you want to restore the California dream. That is one of the things you want to achieve. So my first question is, what does that mean, and how do you do it?
So let me have the audience answer that one. How many of you how many folks here do not own their own home? Okay, keep your hands up, keep your hands up. How many of you who have your hands up are over 50? There. So you can see what I'm fighting for. All those hands that are up, that at some point probably would like to be able to acquire the most valuable asset that most people ever have in their lifetime, their homes. Most young folks today can't dream to do what my parents did. My dad, with a 6th grade education, he had to start working after 6th grade because he was the oldest of 8 kids. And so he worked with his hands all his life, farm working, then ultimately as a road construction worker. My mom didn't come to this country till she was 18, when she came from Guadalajara, Jalisco, Mexico, and she didn't get to go to college either. But they did buy a house. They did send my 3 sisters and I to college or the military. They did get to retire in dignity and didn't have to go to Idaho in order to live in dignity. They stayed here in California. How many of the folks that raised their hands, who have all their future ahead of them in their career, really believe that they're going to be able to buy their own home, keep their health insurance, send whatever children they have to college or the military, and then retire in dignity here in California? I guarantee you most of them are saying it is tough to believe that. And that's what we got to fight for, because it can't be my parents' generation as the last generation that actually provides that to their kids. That's what the California dream should be. It should be there for everyone. And that's what I'm fighting for, because I owe my parents for giving me this chance. This is my way to pay back.
So how did the dream get extinguished? Because, Democrats have been in charge of the state for a very long time. And Republicans would say, well, they broke it. Give us a chance to fix it. Of course, they haven't won a statewide election since 2006. But, don't Democrats, share some complicity in the situation?
Well, we're all in the boat together, so we share in the blame, and
somebody's driving the boat.
Yeah, and we have become the 4th largest economy in the world in that time. So something's going on that's pretty good. The difficulty is this: the prosperity is staying at the top, and it's not getting to everyone else. It's not getting to everyone else like my folks. I guarantee you, and most of the young folks who raised their hands that don't have a home here are probably in college or out of college. My parents never had that dream to be able to do that. They had to do it without that education. But they were fortunate they were able to. I tell you 2 real quick things that are obvious today as opposed to yesteryear. You need more money today for a down payment than you could make in probably 4 years of work. When my parents were working, they could dream that if they saved enough after a few years, they'd be able to make their down payment. Then you just got to keep hustling, working so you make the mortgage payments. But today, most young people, first-time home buyers, can't put enough capital down to make the down payment. That's what stops a lot of folks from becoming homeowners. Secondly, we haven't built enough. And if anyone here take Econ 101, you got a lot of demand, little supply, prices go way up. And that's what we're facing as well. And of course, now we have to deal with the fact that for too many years we didn't build enough housing in the right places and in the right way.
So, Governor Newsom, when he ran in 2018, said he wanted to build 3.5 million new homes in his 8 years. I don't think he's broken, 300,000, or I don't know exactly, but it's nowhere near 3.5. Governor Brown signed a bunch of bills to accelerate housing. Governor Newsom has done that as well. CEQA has been reformed. There's another bill on his desk now that would allow more density around transit corridors, SB 79. So what more would you do as governor, or do we need to see how all these things that have already been done play out?
The legislature, working with the governor, did some good things this year that will streamline CEQA. There is more focus on how we will build, so we're not just going to build anywhere. There was talk in earlier days at how we would let people build McMansions in small lots. We don't want to see that. What we want to see is smart housing. Smart housing means if you've got transit hubs, that's where you build more housing. So it's easy to get around and get to work. If you want to be able to build outside of urban areas, you don't go, in the first place you build is in hilly, brushy places that are going to be extremely likely to have fires. And so what you have to do is be smart where you build. But we can build, and we will build. And if we do it in a smart way, we will be able to start making up the difference between supply and demand. The other thing we have to do is make it so that people can make that down payment, come up with some innovative ways of doing that. I think, for example, public servants, folks who don't get to make a whole lot of money working in, say, Silicon Valley, we should try to help make it affordable for them to buy near where they work. And so I'm willing to try to come up with programs that provide subsidies, loan repayment programs for those down payments, lower interest rates that make it possible for them to believe that they can get into a home. We do that, and before you know it, it pays us back because the equity that they grow will then make it possible for them to either move into a different home, a bigger home perhaps, but they'll be able to pay us back because they're adding money into the economy.
What do you think it takes in this moment to be a great governor?
Tenacity, experience, authenticity. I'd say if you have, there's a word in Spanish, ganas. Yeah. Oh, good. Some of you know this. Don't look it up in the dictionary. It's going to say something like a desire. No. I always tell people, if you've got guts, if you've got game, if you've got grit, then you've got ganas. And that's what you need today is ganas. But you can't have ganas just floating there. You have to have ganas that's informed by experience. Let me put it this way. You're on a plane. The pilot and co-pilot have gone down. They come out and say, who's flown a plane before? Are you going to volunteer and say, I have, even if you haven't? You're going to want the best person to get in front of that, in that cockpit to bring you down safely. Experience. Right now, when we're in these crises, some of them natural disasters like these wildfires that hit Palisades and Altadena, some of them completely man-made, like what we're suffering from Washington, D.C. You need to know how to deal with them. Anybody here ever had to get out of a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic? Anyone here ever had to negotiate with the largest pharmaceutical companies to drop drug prices up to 80%? Anyone here ever have to try to take that nose-diving American economy that was losing jobs and therefore health care insurance for Americans and turn it around so that Americans get back into health care, they got their insurance again, to the point where you now have a record number of Americans who have health insurance coverage, at least when I left? Anyone here had to take on Donald Trump and beat him when he tried to eliminate the Affordable Care Act? I took him to court, all the way to the Supreme Court. I won. When he took on DACA and the Dreamers, and he said he was going to dismantle the program, I said no. I took him to the court. We went all the way to the Supreme Court. I won. As I said, who do you want in that cockpit when California has to get to the point where I can make it so you can get your home, you can send your kids to college, you can retire in dignity, you won't be paying $8 for a carton of eggs? Experience.
There is a reality, and you kind of alluded to it a second ago there with the wildfires. I mean, California is in some ways, we're at war with Washington, they're at war with us, but we need their federal resources for things like FEMA and disaster relief. And initially, Gavin Newsom tried to play nice, and then he pivoted, and he's now going full force, against him with lawsuits and Prop 50 and everything else. Is there a happy medium, or is it just one way or the other? And don't you risk, if it's all lawsuits and fights and the rest of it, don't you risk, not having them there when you need them most?
Scott, it's intuitive if you've been there before. So ballerinas, I think, are awesome because the discipline it takes to actually get to do that, intense. It's as intense as any football player, basketball player. Any poker players in the house? You know that when you win, it's not because you have the best hand. It's because you've read everyone else's face and you know what they have. It's that intuition you gain from having gone through this. And so when it comes to Donald Trump, I'm going to work with him when I have to. I have no choice. The federal government is California's biggest partner. We have to work with them. But then I'm going to stand up to him, as I did when I was Attorney General, when I must as well. Let me give you an example. I sued Donald Trump and ICE because they were trying to compel California in those days, as they are now, to do immigration enforcement for them, with them. And we said, you get to do federal immigration enforcement. The Constitution gives you that right. You can't force us to do it. They tried to deny us close to $60 million in local law enforcement money, grants for our police departments because we wouldn't go along. I sued him. I won. I won because I knew the law. I knew he had gone beyond his authorities to try to make us do something that we're not required to do under the Constitution. It was intuitive for me to go after him because I knew the law, but I also knew that he had also exceeded his, there's a term of art in the law, arbitrary and capricious. When government acts arbitrarily and capriciously, that's a no-no, because your government is supposed to be for and by and of the people. And so I was able to sue him and win, not because I got lucky, not because I had the best hand, because I knew how to read Donald Trump.
So sticking with that poker analogy, what cards does the governor hold, other than lawsuits, as leverage with the federal government?
And it's fascinating because you realize the sheer power of the federal government and how the Constitution gives the federal government so much authority.
With help from the Supreme Court.
Well, that's where I was going. And especially when you got a guy who exceeds his own authority, it makes it tough because not only are they powerful, but now they're powerful to the point about unlawfully powerful. So when Donald Trump is trying to send National Guard troops into Oregon, and Oregon wins in court with a Trump judge saying can't do that, then Donald Trump says, okay, well then I'm going to send California National Guard into Oregon because your rule said I can't send Oregon National Guard into Oregon. The judge said, don't play that game. And said no. And so here's a guy who's president who is slapped down and still says, I'm going to do it. That's the difficulty we all have. But there are some tools we can use. Principally, the Constitution. Principally, not taking the orders of the federal government and resisting. And I think the best weapon we have is this. Videotape. I hope everyone in California becomes a great videographer because the best weapon against Donald Trump are the facts. And the more we're prepared to prove that Donald Trump and his forces exceeded their authority with the facts, with actual video proof, the sooner we're going to stop him from invading places, using Black Hawk helicopters to come down with military into an apartment building as they did in Chicago in the dead of night.
But you're saying
can't do that.
Take pictures, take videos, but there are detention facilities where elected officials can't even get inside to see what the conditions are.
Which is not appropriate, but that's what he's doing.
And it doesn't seem like anybody can stop him. I mean, elected officials have been arrested outside told they can't come in.
That's what I said. He is bending our institutions.
Well, what can you do besides file lawsuits?
It's tough because we don't have an armed force that's there to fight our own government. And so that's where it becomes very difficult. And the worst part is, I think most of us want to do this according to the Constitution. It's unfortunate that we're going into this boxing match trying to not hit below the belt. Meanwhile, this guy is doing everything he can to do what he can to hit us everywhere below the belt. And that makes it very difficult. So at some point, you have to ask yourself, how much can I put up with trying to fight the right way when he hits below the belt? Prop 50, vote yes, because that's our way of saying to him, you're hitting below the belt, and we're not going to just take it. We're going to hit back. We're not hitting below the belt, and you know why? Unlike Donald Trump and in Texas, where they changed congressional districts without ever asking Texans, the voters in Texas, in California, we're saying we're going to fight your fire back, but we're going to ask our voters to give us that authority to fight back. And that's where we do things differently. We are going to fight, and we're going to try to take on your dirty tactics, but we're still going to ask the voters for permission. That's a very different way of looking at life and at governance. We still respect the law, and we ask the voters to give us the authority. Donald Trump doesn't bother to ask voters if they'll give him authority. He just goes.
Coming back to the affordability thing, and I think you mentioned Silicon Valley. I mean, we are in a moment, not just in California, but nationally, where more and more wealth is being concentrated into the hands of fewer and fewer people. We have the highest poverty rate. I think it's us in Louisiana. We're tied for the highest rate of poverty. And a lot of that is the cost of living here in California. So how do you, as governor, how would you begin to address that? Would you support raising income taxes on the super wealthy, or looking at the other, end of the spectrum, raising the minimum wage to 20 or more?
There will likely be a ballot on the measure in 2026 that will be put on by some of our unions that try to give the UC system, the UC workers the same opportunity that UC executives get. The UC system offers executives loan forgiveness or loan repayment programs where to get into a home, they offer them a down payment. The UC system puts up the down payment for these executives to be able to buy homes, which makes sense because it's really expensive to live in California, and a lot of these executives could go elsewhere other than the UC system, but probably make more money. And so one of the ways you attract them to take the job is that you tell them you can buy a house, you don't have to worry about putting your down payment. If we do that for the executives, why don't we do that for the folks who are day-to-day working to keep the UC system campuses clean, operating properly? And so the initiative will say something very simple. There are about 500 loans that have been put out by the UC system to these executives. Whatever number you put out to executives, you got to put out to your workers. That's it. That's how you start making inroads, by making it possible for folks who aren't making six-figure salaries to be able to buy a house.
But that's money that would have to come out of the UC budget.
Actually, no. It pays for itself, and the UC system, if you know it, has a number of funds that they use. And actually, I should correct myself. There's no taxpayer money that gets used to do this. You and I will not pay a cent for that program because the UC system, because it is operated differently than the rest of the state, can create these different pots of money. And what they did is they pulled from this pot of money to make it possible to offer these executives these down payment grant. Essentially, it's a loan, but you don't have to worry about it once you sell the house. You pay back the UC system for the 20% down and any interest that accrued in value, the equity that accrued in that 20%. So no one's out of pocket. The executive's not out of pocket. Taxpayers aren't out of pocket. The UC system isn't out of pocket because, for the most part, the value of those properties increases, and we all get something back.
Where does that money come from? And what's the price tag if that were to pass?
It's the pots that the UC system can create, whether it's through philanthropic work where they've gotten dollars from other sources, or maybe it's revenues that they've generated through their research and so forth, but it's not coming from taxpayers.
Yeah. Sticking with UC, of course, the president has frozen, I think, $500 million in research. They're threatening other universities, including Berkeley, with freezing funds, withdrawing funds, cutting funds. What should the university do in response? What can they do? What would you do? You would be, as governor, you would be a member of the Regents, ex officio, I guess, member. What would you do? What would you advocate for?
Well, we're already in court, and we've won several of those battles. Because, again, what the president is doing is not lawful. And he just does it anyhow until he's told no. And in some cases, he hasn't been told no, which is the really worrisome part. But most of those cases, we will win. I say that to you as, again, the AG who took on cases very similar, and we won. Although the Supreme Court is getting a little dubious these days in my book. The other things that we have to do are we simply have to be prepared to fight with the tools that we have. I have a feeling, and I've already started some conversations with some folks in the industry, in the healthcare, and I was talking last week to folks in the biotech industry, our life sciences industry. I think there's an interest, an appetite in building in California and probably combining with some other like-minded states, Washington, Oregon, Hawaii, a California CDC, a California National Institutes of Health, a California FDA, Food and Drug Administration. Let's not let the dysfunction in Washington, D.C. deny us the chance to put out life-saving drugs for cancer and Alzheimer's simply because you have a president who's actually cutting the money for research, firing some of the researchers that are doing some of the greatest work, not deploying our scientists where we must. We have a lot of talent. We have great institutions that do the research. We might be able to do that. We're going to need help because we don't have the tax base. We don't get to print money in our states, so we can't replicate what the federal government does, but we can, with the help of industry, philanthropy, and the state government, put together an operation, which I know the universities would jump on, where we let them continue to thrive and do the research, and we then get the benefit of the products from that research.
The president is also asking, I think, 9 universities, including USC, to sign an agreement to unfreeze funding that would basically help him implement his agenda on campus in terms of hiring and curriculum and those kinds of things. What the governor has been very clear. He said, if you sign that, USC, your Cal grants are gone, which punishes the students, really. But what would you do as governor in that case? What would you tell universities and in general, just all of our CSU system, everybody?
Well, again, here, another way of describing what the president is doing, there's a simple word. This one you can look up in the dictionary. It's called extortion. You give in to extortion, you don't stop. I mean, something not as nefarious as extortion, but I think all of us have read this book. You give a mouse a cookie. You give this mouse a cookie, he's going to ask you for a whole lot more. And you cannot start caving to this guy. I say that not just as someone who believes in our Constitution. I say this as the Attorney General of the state of California, who this guy wanted a whole lot of our cookies. And we said no. And I used to love to play poker. And so.
Why'd you stop?
I became Attorney General, and it's a little more difficult. Although I still play periodically. But, it's all about reading your opponent. And this guy, you can read him. What was that type of the label they gave the president? Taco? Yeah. If you know where he's going and you know how much leverage he has, you can beat him. And that's the thing. Trying to beat him. And I wish the university would stick to their guns. I know it's going to cost them something to do so, but you can't give in to these kind of guys. It's the bully at the schoolyard lunch, getting your lunch money.
Well, UC Berkeley just handed over 160 names of staff and students who were apparently involved with pro-Palestinian rights, either protests or writings or whatever. Was that a mistake?
Absolutely. Come on. What kind of society are we? In fact, I would say all those people, young people who are studying, I want them to hear every side of that different issue and debate. Let them decide what's right or wrong. Don't condemn them for taking a particular position, whether it was a position that said, I support Palestinians or I support Israelis. It's important that they get to go through that, because later on, Scott, in life, like you and me, others who are now owning homes and all, we better use that experience the right way. But when you are fortunate to be in, especially if you're fortunate to be in a university where you get to explore, you want to be challenged in the most extreme ways, because you want to be ready to, when you have to face that as now the decision maker, not as a college student, you want to know which way to go.
Somebody I was talking to said that, in fact, it's not unusual for the DOJ, Department of Justice, to ask universities for information about people, and it's not that unusual to turn it over. What was different about this is that those 160 people were told by the university that their names had been turned over. What's the law on that? If the DOJ comes to you and says, we want to know X, Y, Z, do you have to give it to them?
There are privacy implications. It just depends on what the information is. And once again, I say this not as just a observer of the Constitution. I say this to you as the former Attorney General, where we had to deal with these things on privacy issues. We protect privacy because, it's pretty simple why we protect privacy. Right? Once you let it out, you can't pull it back. Once you've rung that bell, you cannot say, please don't listen to what you just saw or heard. I released that information improperly. No, it's there. It's in the universe forever. And you always have to default on the side of protecting privacy. And so when an institution like the UC campuses start to release information, we got to nip that in the bud, because it could be your information next time, and you wouldn't want that.
I want to come back to ICE and immigration. Border security was a huge issue when President Biden was in the White House. There were images regularly of people streaming over, migrants looking for asylum. And to many Americans, it looked out of control. And ultimately, it was sealed up in a better way. It was more orderly. Was it a mistake? Did Democrats listen too much to the advocates in the party, the more extreme, or not I won't say extreme, but more liberal folks who were saying, look, we people have a right to seek asylum here. We need to let them in. What went wrong? Because obviously it didn't have to happen because the president stopped it after a while.
Look, what went wrong is that we've known for decades our system on immigration is broken. There is a law that says if someone petitions for asylum, they have a right, not a privilege, a right to have a hearing on their concern, because typically asylum means you're fleeing persecution or death. Those are essentially the definitions. So you're entitled to a hearing. So the difficulty started where a whole lot of folks trying to come into the country learned the trick of saying the moment they stepped onto U.S. soil, I petition for asylum. And that's when people started coming. And because our system processes those cases slowly, more and more people could come and not be processed, and they could stay. Many of them were not going to be eligible, but the process, the adjudication didn't go forward. That's where it's broken. By the way, I've been trying to change that for years. When I was in Congress, I tried to change that. I pointed it out when I was Secretary of HHS. Even though it wasn't my purview, I pointed that out to the administration and to Congress. But Congress has not changed the law. And so right now, the reason Donald Trump has been able to thwart some of that is because he's violating the law, not because he just figured out a way to solve immigration. He's just not giving people the rights.
But how did the Biden administration do it? They created an app and people had to wait in Mexico instead of coming in?
Yeah, they were trying to keep it.
Isn't that a violation of the law?
The app wasn't a violation of the law.
But not allowing them into the U.S.
Well, it was trying to say to them, instead of coming into the U.S., start the application process outside the U.S. so we could start to process it. But the other thing, if you take a look at the president's budgets over the years, President Biden's budgets, he asked for money for more administrative law judges, more adjudication folks so they can get through the process of these cases. Congress never gave him the money. And so that made it very difficult. But that wouldn't have solved it by itself because too many folks are coming. We needed to reform the asylum laws themselves on how they would work We still haven't done that. The fact that Donald Trump has violated the law, he's getting away with it. Why? Because most of these folks aren't from the U.S. They can't petition. They probably don't have money to even petition to exercise their rights. And that's why it's succeeding. But that's not the way you should do business, is by violating the law, violating people's rights because you can get away with it.
I'm curious, where you think the deportation line should be drawn. Because, Trump said we're going to get rid of all the rapists and the murderers. He's gone way beyond that, and he's going to Home Depot and into schools and immigration courts and grabbing people, terrorizing neighborhoods in a lot of ways, and families, tearing them apart. In most cases, these are people who have not violated the law, other than they're in the country illegally. So where is the line?
And some folks aren't going to like that I say this. The line's very clear. If you've come without documents, you don't have a right to stay in this country. Now, you can make a claim for hardship, and we can consider that. That's part of the law if you have a hardship. But you don't have a right to stay in the country. For 20 years when I was in Congress, we worked on immigration reform, and that was something that was very clear. We can't just sort of say, everybody who crossed the line gets to stay because they got in. No. You still have to make a claim. There were going to be a whole lot of folks under even Democrats' immigration reform who would have been returned because they didn't have a legitimate basis to stay in the country. And so we have to recognize we're a sovereign nation. We have a right to regulate who comes into this country. The difficulty is this, and this is where we go to the worker, folks like my parents. We tango with immigrants. It takes two to tango, right? Have you heard of any American who's been prosecuted for violating the law that doesn't allow you to hire an immigrant without documents? No, but you hear about all the immigrants being prosecuted and deported. Americans are violating the law every day. You and I know that probably someone in this building doesn't have documents, is going to clean up after us, probably help put the food together that you're eating, probably is caring for someone in your family who needs aid. We know this. We've been tangoing with immigrants for the longest time. And by the way, they do a darn good job. And what most Americans are willing to do say is, okay, you've been here, you've been working hard, you're paying taxes. Most of the folks pay taxes because that's the only way they can get their checks. Pay taxes, you're living by the rules. I'm going to give you a chance. Most of the immigration reform bills said you have to have been here for 5 years doing that to prove your bona fides. And so there are a whole bunch of folks who wouldn't qualify for that. We can get there. It's just become a political tool. And for Donald Trump, it's the point of his spear to really get to Americans. And so I simply say to you, there are solutions to this. One of them is to close our eyes and pretend we haven't tangled with long-term immigrants. We can solve this. But whether you like it or not, if someone just crossed over the border, that doesn't give them the right to stay in the country.
Hey, Scott, we got one more question before we go to the audience. So you get to pick your one more question.
I have it already, and then think of your questions. But sticking with immigration, California has I think it was the California Values Act. It's basically a sanctuary state. Jerry Brown, perhaps in his wisdom, exempted prisons from that, state prisons, so that prisons, when they're releasing an undocumented immigrant who has been serving time, can, I believe, coordinate with ICE to have them deported. That's not the case for counties, most counties, and local governments as well. So where are you on that? Is it a mistake for counties and cities that are sanctuaries to not cooperate? And I'm not saying turn them over, but to sort of be an impediment, or is that not what's happening?
So Scott, here's the part where being old helps. I was there when Governor Brown was doing this work. I was there because I was helping advise the governor and the legislature on SB 54. That was the law that created that situation. Let me correct something. ICE already has information on all of these individuals who are incarcerated. They get that because it's publicly available. Here's what ICE was asking us to do. ICE was saying to us, oh, we see on this list that you've got some folks that are incarcerated that are getting close to release. Once their release date is upon us, the state of California loses jurisdiction to detain them, right? You've served your time. California doesn't have by right the authority to say, I'm going to keep you locked up longer. What I said is, hey, we see that you're going to be releasing some folks in the next week or so. Can you hold them for the next month until we're ready to go pick them up? Some sheriffs in county jails were doing that. Some, in cases I suspect in the state prison penitentiary system, they were doing that. That is against the law. You are holding someone, you are imprisoning someone without legal authority to imprison. And what SB 54 said is, hey, we're no longer going to play this game of fulfilling ICE's wish that we hold people for them. ICE wants them held. They have detention facilities. They can do it. And so SB 54 simply said, we will not detain beyond what our authority allows us to. And we're not going to be out there giving you information about, what we're willing to do to hold them longer.
Why not? Why not?
Because we don't have authority to hold them longer.
Why not say we're releasing them Thursday?
We did. We do.
And
today, we give that information. That information is available right now. Right now. What we don't do is hold people beyond the time that we have constitutional authority to hold them. What ICE doesn't like is they're saying, hey, we're kind of busy. Hold them for us. And we're saying, sorry, you do it. And they can, by the way, obviously Donald Trump has shown that they could detain a whole lot of folks. Of course, they just do it against the law, but they do it. And so what I'm saying to you is we are not, here's our problem. We play under the rules in California. When we're not hitting below the belt. ICE can go after these folks right now that are imprisoned. And by the way, the reason it was made obvious in SB 54 that the state prisons would not engage in that is because if you're locked up in a penitentiary, you're probably a pretty bad guy. And so even if you're being released, there we want to make sure the most violent of criminals who may get released have served their time. Still, if they're immigrant and deportable, that we give that information to ICE. So we may affirmatively do that instead of waiting for them to read over the listing of people who are going to be released. But that's so that we go above and beyond for safety purposes. Say, hey, there is this guy who's been a pretty bad actor. He's probably deportable. You should know about it. You may not see it. You could see it, but if you're not paying attention, just in case.
Yeah. Okay. Questions from the audience.
So if you are, look at those hands coming up. There's going to be 2 microphones. We're going to alternate a little bit. If you're a UC student, please wave your hand because I do want to make our UC students have an opportunity. And also feel free to give your name and affiliation if you like.
Thank you. My name is Erin Stumpf. I'm a California real estate broker, and I'm really happy to hear that homeownership seems to be a high priority for you. I'm curious, do you think that the California Dream for All program is a good program? Should it be expanded? And should the programs currently administered under the Cal HFA down payment assistance, would you like to see those funded or revamped, or what would you do with those programs?
Aaron, all of the above. I think we should explore every opportunity to give incentives. The earlier you do it, the better. Obviously, we have to be careful what we do with taxpayer dollars, but if you incent activity, if you partner with someone, people have saved some money. It's just that they're sticker shock when they realize, and you know this, when they realize what the 20% down payment will be. They could do a 10% or a 5% down payment, but now their interest rates on their mortgages go way up. And what we may do is say, okay, look, you only have 5% that you can put down. The interest rate on that 95% loan instead of an 80% loan is going to be higher because the bank's going to charge you more because you're riskier. We'll cover the difference in the interest. You were going to get a 5% loan when you were going to borrow 80%, but now that you have to borrow 90% of the value of the home, your interest rate goes to 6%. No, we'll cover the 1%. For that 1% that we help you cover, very little, I get you in a house, you develop equity, you probably then sell it at some point, you pay me, the state of California, on the sale of that home. It's a virtuous process if we do it right. So absolutely. My parents bought a home. I bought a home. I always do work on my homes, and they always increase in value. It's the most valuable asset almost 98% of Americans will ever have.
All right, we got a question over front here, this side of the room. Haley's got the mic. Thank you, and here we go.
Hi, my name is Rachel Lingish. I'm a healthcare advocate. I'm here with some other healthcare advocates, a former UC student myself. So one of the things we haven't talked about yet is one of the major powers that a governor has is the budget and overseeing the state budget. And one thing we know from HR 1 is that the biggest cuts are coming to healthcare. $30 billion at least coming to healthcare. So what kind of tools are you ready to use as a governor to utilize our budget and even raise the revenue needed to make sure that millions and millions of Californians aren't losing their healthcare or having it be exponentially more expensive?
I do love specific question, direct one. Thank you. Go for it.
And Rachel, right? You said Rachel. So Rachel, first let me start by saying this. Healthcare is on the ballot for 2026 because there is no more frontal attack that's coming from Washington on California than on healthcare. When we lose that much money, and it's overall $1 trillion cut to Medicaid, the ACA, wait a month and you will find if any of you have, if any of you are the 24 million Americans who have Affordable Care Act coverage, insurance coverage, wait till you see what your premiums will be if Republicans don't work with Democrats to protect the subsidies that were provided. It will be unaffordable for most middle class. This is for middle class families, not for poor folks, middle class families. Healthcare is on the ballot. I intend to be California's healthcare governor because I understand the risk of not addressing healthcare. So here's the first thing I'll say. We're not going backwards. So everything we've done to get to the point of near universal coverage, California is on the precipice of actually providing everyone in the state, everyone, not just citizens, not just California citizens, everyone with access to health care. We can't go backwards because it's penny wise, pound foolish. You know what happens if you've ever been uninsured. You know what happens. If your child is ill, hurting, you wait to see if you can get them cured with what you can do. If they keep getting worse, you wait. And you wait until there's no waiting because that's your child. Then you take them to the hospital. But you can't pay the bill. So what happens? The hospital has to swallow the cost. Taxpayers end up having to cover it. Or you and me as holders of health insurance coverage pay because our premiums go up to cover the cost because the hospital has to get payment from somewhere. Either that or the hospital closes down. And so we're not going backwards. How do I get the money? I've already spoken to most of the healthcare sector, hospitals, doctors, community centers, nursing homes. Everyone's going to have to tighten their belt a bit, but there is money. We spend more money in this country, in this state, than any other place in the world when it comes to healthcare. There is what I call a lot of friction in the system. People who don't add healthcare value, medical value to that dollar. And I think we can get rid of some of the friction. All the administrators, all the middlemen who take money out of the system before you get your health care. And what I would say is that we have to make sure that we're protecting the healthcare workers because there could be such burnout that we can least afford to lose the people who are actually doing the care right now. And so we can figure this out. We have no choice but to figure it out because if we don't, it's going to cost us more in the long run when people walk in to get their health care, not through the primary care physician's office, but through the door of the emergency room.
Scott, you look like you have a question.
Real quick, yeah, you said we can't go backwards, and yet the current budget puts a pause on new enrollees for adult undocumented immigrants, and it's going to begin charging $30 a month as a premium, which they didn't have. Was that a mistake?
We're not going backwards, I'll tell you that. I'm not going to try to...
but you're going to have some people that don't have coverage.
No, we're not, okay, I won't Monday morning quarterback what was done. What I will tell you is on my watch, the legislature and I will not go backwards. And I say this to you because I've been there. When I was told in Congress, we don't have any more money to help get COVID vaccines out there, and they were going to cut the money that was made available for the under and uninsured. How many of you have paid a penny for your COVID vaccines? Not a one of you. Not a one of you. And when Congress started sweeping up, Republicans started sweeping up the COVID money that we still had for 2024, 2025, and I told the president, I told the White House, I need to keep at least $1.2 billion of all that money that they're sweeping up because there are still Americans who don't have health insurance and they will not be able to afford getting those COVID shots. And they will not pay the price of the COVID shots and they'll take the risk because they need that money to pay the rent or to get food on the table. And so I fought and I was able to preserve $1.2 billion for uninsured and underinsured in what we called the Bridge Access Program. And that allowed me to continue to provide health care, mostly to communities of color, mostly communities in the rural areas that could not have otherwise have afforded that COVID vaccine on their own. And we did it even though people said it was not possible. When I was told you cannot negotiate against the largest pharmaceutical companies to get lower drug prices, we did it. We lowered the prices up to 80%. You can do it, you just got to believe it. And so when someone says, oh, you can't do this, the budget deficits and the legislature, no. You have no choice. If you have ganas, you will do it.
Ooh, I like that. Okay, we have a question here. And go ahead and say your name.
Perfect. Sara Baches, a proud UC Berkeley Bear in education. Go Bears! And children's
I won't take offense that I went to Stanford, okay?
Oh, boy. Wow. Ooh, man.
against you.
Obviously, you all don't take offense either.
No. In your vision for a California dream, you did mention childcare and children. And so where does it fit into your vision of investing in early learning and childcare and education? Where are the littles? And how do we make sure that they're protected?
Yeah. And I think I mentioned the one great American who guided me over my lifetime, Maria Teresa Becerra, my mom, when she said, "Mijo, es mejor prevenir que remediar." It is always better to prevent, my son, than to remediate. Let me give you the second great American I usually quote when I mention my mom, probably better known than my mom. It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. Frederick Douglass said that about 170 years ago, and it is true today. We spend so much money repairing broken men and women in this country and in this state. We should be spending it to build strong children. And so it should not surprise you, I will be a strong advocate for early childhood education. And by early child, I don't mean 2-3 years of age. I have a wife who's a high-risk OBGYN. She says, "Javier, you know, the fetus, the baby is learning in the womb. We can do a lot of things." And so I believe we have to start as early as possible, including providing women with doulas, promotoras, so that they can be healing these pregnant women early to get them ready for delivery so they can have a great birth. You know, some of the greatest, the intensity of death of new moms is within about the first 6 months after they deliver. Why? Because the stress physically and emotionally on women is so great. I tell you this because my wife, again, a high-risk OBGYN, but because as secretary, we put more money into maternal health than had ever been done before. We took Medicaid, which was a program to give a woman, half of all babies born in America and in California, born through the Medicaid program, through Medicaid insurance. Medicaid, before we came in, offered a woman and her baby 60 days of care under Medicaid. After that, if she didn't qualify for it, she lost the Medicaid coverage. She was on her own for her health insurance for her and baby. On my watch, we extended it to 365 days because we know that if a woman can have an opportunity to have the help that she needs for her baby, it's not just mom, it's mom and baby who will be much healthier and ready to thrive. And so early childhood education, on my watch, is happening. We will continue to grow this because it is easier to build that baby into a strong adult than to try to repair them afterwards when they're out there trying to live in the world.
This might be the last question. We're going to see how lightning round we can do. So, okay.
My apologies.
Buenas tardes. First of all, thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you. Give us your name.
Yeah, my name's Silverio Rizzo. I'm a legislative assistant here at the Capitol. And I wanted to go back about the conversation regarding housing affordability. I know you kind of mentioned a lot of the zoning reform and other kind of streamlining that's been done to try to achieve affordability, but nonetheless, there's still very long lines for voucher recipients or people that are eligible. And then once people are eligible, there's also difficulty in finding that. And on top of that, the funding for affordable housing, I don't think is necessarily equivalent to the need. And so it's kind of a long question, but my question essentially is, one, do you believe that, the state should potentially invest more in affordable housing construction to kind of actually try to meet that need and potentially even, achieve what the current governor's kind of visions were? And two, What do you think about social housing as part of that conversation? Partially also because some social housing models have homeownership as part of that, and can also potentially account for the variations in interest rates and all of those other kind of stuff.
Great questions. Lightning round.
Lightning. I've already touched this a bit, so what I'm going to say is I'll try to go right to the nut. You need to have both affordable housing but market rate housing. You have to make it so that the private sector, because there's not enough money in the public sector. We have a budget deficit in the state, and Donald Trump is cutting the money from HUD that we have to make investments in affordable housing in the country. And so you're not going to be able to do it simply with public dollars. And so we need to get the private sector, the developers, to work with us to do not just the affordable, but market rate, because market rate will sell as well. And we need to give the development community incentive to build more. And so what we need to do, we've shaved some of the regs. We're talking clearly that we want to build more, and what we have to do is make it so that the atmosphere, the sense out there and the ambience is for construction. And if we do that right, by the way, with real wages, because we're not interested in having developers do it for minimum wages, then we do this so that the people who are building the homes can actually buy the homes that they just finished building.
Done, Catherine?
I think so. You want to have a closing spot real quick? Any closing remarks?
Yeah, well, I didn't know you had 3 sisters. I knew you had 3 daughters.
Yes. Surrounded by women.
What did you
all my
learn?
life.
What did you learn? What did they teach you?
Women are powerful. I mean, they're audacious. They are thoughtful. I have hugs and kisses for the rest of my life. And they're steady. And I think men, we're meteoric. We misapply and misinterpret our strength. And my wife and I make a great combination, I will say that. But look, I think we're seeing now that women have opportunities. Our universities are clearly a sign of it, where you see women now outnumber men. When I was going to college, that was just the total opposite. But you give people a chance. By the way, it's not just women. I'm the son of a 6th grade educated man. I didn't know how to apply to college. I never studied for the SAT. You give people a chance, and if you've got ganas, it really can happen. And I'm running for governor because I know there's so many people who have ganas, but they've never had a chance. And if we give them a chance, dreamers are going to be some of the greatest leaders America has ever seen. Why? Because they have had to have ganas all their existence just to stick around and try to make it so that their family doesn't have to leave while they get to stay. It's just amazing. So if I could close with this. I always tell young folks who ask me, how did you get into politics? What should we look to do? I always tell them, you want to know where a leader's going to take you? Know where they've come from. And I believe that if a leader is authentic, you're going to see their history in what they do. I'm going to fight for that construction worker and clerical worker because that's where I come from. I'm going to fight to open that college education because I'm going to fight for early childhood education so the kid is ready and doesn't go through an experience like me to get lucky enough to have a friend who was about to throw away his application to Stanford University, stop him and say, what are you doing? He said, I was throwing this away. I don't think I can get in anymore. I said, wait, don't throw it away. Give it to me. Right before the deadline, I filled it out. I got in. And it should not be that way. We should be prepared. And I want everyone to be given that chance, but I want more everyone to see all those young people who just want the chance. And if I can do that as governor, man, California, 4th largest economy, and that is not the limit. And so just wait. As the son of immigrants, I've got optimism that runs in my DNA. And I think as people who live in California and see what we have optimism in our DNA. We have to restore it because there are people who can't figure out how to buy a house, and that is not California. And so I'm running for governor because I was given a chance. I'm not going to be the last. And I hope all of you will join me because there are so many adversities that we face. Natural, these wildfires and all the climate change, and then the man-made ones from Washington, D.C. We can tackle them. You just have to have gotten us.
All right, Secretary, thank you.
Well, I'm
Catherine,
very
last word to
appreciative of
you.
that. Thank you for coming. I really do hope you saw today as an open debate and discussion. Took it a little on the chin, University of California. But I will tell you, we would have been happy to have you. And I have to say, University of California is the second largest employer in the state. The medical research they do, the terrific teaching and instruction they do, and we're proud to have you here today.
And the greatest institution of higher education in the world.
Came from a Stanford grad right there. So wonderful to have you here. Please join us in the coming weeks for our other events and have a wonderful week. Thank you.